Welcome to Unit 8 of the TESOL course at Southern Utah University. In this video, we'll be talking about listening and different tasks and types. We'll talk about the 4 language skills and then the need to teach listening. We'll also talk about different tasks and types involved in listening, as well as some strategies and skills for learners. So listening is one of the 4 language skills. It's considered what we would call a receptive skill. So both listening and reading are receptive skills, but listening is the oral receptive skill and reading is the written receptive skill. Speaking and writing are both productive skills, again on an oral side and a written side. So together these 4 skills are what involve most of the communication that we do. So why should we teach listening? Listening is actually the most used skill of all of our skills, but unfortunately it is often the least taught. So we use listening twice as much as we do speaking in our daily life, 4 times as much as we do reading, and 5 times as much as we do writing. The reality is most of the language that someone learns is through their listening skill because they're given instructions or they're listening to other sources. So if we're not helping learners improve their listening ability, we're really limiting their ability to learn language, and what we're really doing is disabling them for all of the kinds of listening interaction that they have throughout the day, and most of that is listening. So there are different ways that researchers try to describe listening. One of those ways is to make the contrast between transactional and interpersonal listening. Transactional, the focus is more on the message and the task. I need to listen in order to accomplish a task. Interpersonal, the focus here is more on social. I am listening because I want to build a relationship with the person. Both types of listening are important, but it's important to understand that distinction so we realize what's the purpose for listening and really what is our goal. There's also a distinction that's made between intensive listening and extensive. Intensive is when we're really focusing hard on understanding specific pieces of information from a listening source. Extensive listening is we're a little more relaxed. It's often more pleasure listening. For example, watching a TV show or movie or listening to a radio program. We don't care about all of the details. We're just listening for the main idea or for the enjoyment of it. There's also a distinction we could make between listening to recorded sources versus live sources. There's some advantages to listening to a recorded source because we can pause, we can go back, we can review. But when we're listening to a live source, the words disappear as they're spoken, and we have to retain them in memory if we want to go back and review them. And if we're doing that, then we're missing all of the new words. So there's often some challenges to live listening and advantages to listening to recorded sources. Let's talk about some different texts and tasks. When we talk about a text with listening, what we're really talking about is the words that are used. So even though we often think of the word text as being something that is written, when we talk about listening, we can also talk about a text. It just means the words that are spoken. We want to make sure that when we're choosing tasks and texts that we match them to learners' ability levels, but also to their goals, that they're practicing the kinds of things that are going to be meaningful to them. You can use the same listening text for multiple different tasks. Sometimes maybe you're looking for the main idea. Other times you might go back and listen for specific details. Or maybe you're listening for the whole process. Or maybe you're listening for a particular word that is spoken. So there's lots of different ways to use a text to help learners develop a variety of different abilities within listening. Even lower level learners can use authentic texts. And when we say authentic text, what we're talking about here is a text that is used by English users for communication. It's not used to teach someone how to listen. And sometimes people feel like authentic text can only be used with advanced level learners because they're the only ones that are ready for it. But the truth is, even a lower level learner can use an authentic text. They just might not be able to do as much with it. Maybe they're just listening for keywords or for the main idea. But the reality is, especially in English as a second language environments, lower level learners have to deal with authentic texts in their daily life anyways. So we don't have to be afraid of using authentic texts sometimes in the language classroom, but there is certainly some advantages to having texts that are designed for learners that are maybe a little bit easier for them. Let's talk a little bit about strategies and skills. Essentially, a strategy is a tool that we use to help us accomplish a difficult task. And a skill is the same thing, but the difference is that a strategy, it requires more conscious effort. We have to be thinking about how we are doing this, and we're going to use this strategy to help us. But the more we use that strategy, over time, it's going to become more automatic for us, that we use it without having to even think about using it, because it's become part of our mental processes. So that's the major distinction between a strategy and a skill. A strategy is a skill that hasn't become automatic yet. And over time, if we use it more, it may become a skill because we use it without even recognizing that we're using it to solve a problem. So there are a variety of different strategies and skills for listening. One of the big distinctions that's often made is the difference between bottom-up and top-down listening skills. So let's talk about bottom-up. Bottom-up listening skills involve listening to sounds and getting meaning from those sounds. So what's happening is we're listening to something that's maybe a little bit difficult for us, and we piece together the sounds that someone's making, and we know, oh, those sounds mean this word, and then here's another word, and then this means a sentence, and okay, now I've got meaning. So we're kind of building up from the individual sounds towards words and sentences and meaning. TopUp works the opposite way. TopUp, we think about a situation and we activate our background knowledge, our knowledge of the culture, our knowledge of discourse and text types to imagine or predict what we're going to hear. And we use that to help us create meaning. So for example, if we were in what we see this image here, we're probably thinking that this might be maybe a comedy show or a poetry reading. Okay? We're not really expecting so much a conversation here, just because of our knowledge about the culture and maybe what this setting might represent. Now, no one uses just bottom-up or just top-down. Good listeners are using both of those things together as they're listening. It's a complex process. But good listeners know how to use both of them to help them when they encounter difficulties or to prepare them to better understand something before they get into the situation. When we do have problems when we're listening, we will often use what are called compensation strategies. So compensation strategies, an example might be if I'm listening to someone and I'm not quite sure what they're saying, but maybe I look at their body language. And that body language helps me maybe infer their feelings about the topic. Another one might be asking for clarification. Asking, could you please repeat that? That's a compensation strategy. When something's not clear, I could use a strategy to try and solve the problem. Or maybe I restate back to the person, I think what you're saying is this. And then that can help when there's some kind of breakdown in communication. Metacognitive strategies are another important strategy for good listeners. And what this involves is reflecting on our experience as a listener and saying, what's working well for me, what's not, what can I do to get better? So good listeners are also good reflectors, and they think about how to get better and they make plans to get better. So both compensation strategies and metacognitive strategies can help learners become stronger. So in this video we've talked about the 4 language skills. We've emphasized the need to teach listening because it's so important. We talked briefly about tasks and types, and then strategies and skills.